All right, we are live now, folks. So, hey, folks, this is me, Vishwas Nair. I'm the host of this podcast. A lot of times, I wanted to do an show which has everybody filled. The screen is filled today, right? You can see that, there are four people together, including me as an host. I think probably we might add one more as well. So, so the basis of today's stream is basically not to just say anything about open source or anything about a technology, but today it's all about advocating about how to master something in DevOps. It's very difficult to hit upon every concept or every aspect of what DevOps has to offer. But you know what? We are not in an age where there is no information at all. So it's basically googling became the new way of doing something using engineering, right? You learn to Google and you get the information, but still there is a fact that you need to experience being an engineer. I think I'm still learning it. I'm still growing about that experience of being an engineer and being what I can deliver in a production system today. I think thank you to all my panelists who are there today, Carly, Nikita, Tatiana, for being on the show. Means a lot. When you guys have taken your time and want to educate somebody in the community, that means a lot. Thank you so much, folks.
Thanks for having us. Hi.
Sure, then let's start with the first question. I think DevRel has always been a part of our life, right? We have somehow or the other evangelized the product, or been a fan of a technology and went behind a technology, evangelized about it, and we have experienced how developers, they react, but eventually they learn to respond to a problem statement today. So let's start with the first question of like how to approach an engineering problem statement today. Of course, you folks have done some of an engineering problem statement in your lives. So let's learn about how to approach an engineering problem statement today. Because there's a lot of resources, a lot of technologies coming into the market. How to approach it the right way. I think Carly, you can start to answer.
Sure. I think so. My prior background when I was an engineer, one of the things I always wanted to know, because I did a lot of front end as well, was what's the problem I'm actually trying to solve? Like, it's great that we can dive into playing with all sorts of cool and exciting technologies. It's one of the most amazing things about being an engineer. But we also need to make sure that we're building something that solves the actual objective and problem, and we don't get carried away with trying to just put in cool stuff for cool stuff's sake. So I always like to try and just discuss with either team or the people I'm building it for and get some feedback on what the problem is we're trying to solve, what the cases and examples are, and then in parallel work to figure out what particular technologies can solve that problem. Is there just one? Is there many? Is there something that's being used already in the ecosystem for a similar use case that I can perhaps adapt, which might be quicker and easier to bring in? Just need to examine each of those considerations, how testable it is, how easy it is to validate, maintain, support as you go along. And then once you've figured out what those options are, kind of going in ahead and adding it into the project to solve the problem, and also making sure that it kind of conforms to any kind of contributing guidelines that you might have either within your company or within the open source project that you're maintaining. So there might be particular rules about dependencies, preferences, for example, particularly in the JavaScript community, to try and keep the size of the distribution down. So just make sure you're looking into those particular considerations when you're building something. And also have fun. Like, that's one of the best bits.
Yeah, I think that's the best bets that you can do. I think engineering as an example, it has changed to every person, right? Everybody has their own journey to start with. I think I think being in DevRel is always the best part about it, right? You get to talk to people, you get to talk to customers sometimes, and you always make sure that you learn something new from the technology. I think Nikita, you can start with the answer about like how to approach an engineering problem statement, because there's a lot that is going behind in the market when it comes to engineering.
Just don't hate me for the answer. It depends. Like it so much depends on the problem. So many parameters there. And it also depends not only on the problem, but on the environment around this problem. For example, time. Because, for example, if your server is on fire, I once was a part of a release where we had to roll back, and one of the servers literally burned down, the rollback server. And I had a very interesting night till 4 o'clock in the morning on Sunday or Monday. So maybe when such situation arises, that's not the best time to choose a new technology to solve something. Maybe you want to check what your company is already using in this project and fix it and use the pre-created technologies. So, for example, in many companies which prepared for something like COVID, they didn't know that COVID will come, but they knew something will happen. So they had a pack of technologies prepared in advance so people can work from home. If we're talking about some software project to choose, then again, first of all will be time, I think, because it will impact me hugely. And then it will be the community around the problem, because I will need to understand it from the point of community and from the point of business as well. So basically, I'll need to check all the relations between everybody. And yeah, so I'm not sure if it's the best answer, but I'm very cautious with choosing something. And I need to be
Sure.
more cautious with time.
Sure. I think to me, the best part about engineering is it's all about not engineering today. It's all about communicating what has to be done right. Right. You can't be your own boss in your own Xylo or something. You have to go out there, communicate with people, and you have to get back. I think Zufar just joined right now. It was like an ad hoc thing that Nikita had it for the stream, so that what he can also share his insights. I think Tatiana, you can start sharing your insights on your journey of starting something as an engineer, and then you can go ahead with how to be an engineer, how to solve a problem statement as an engineer. I think that is something that I'm supposed to learn. I'm still learning, and I think your insights will give a lot of insights for me to start moving towards engineering a problem statement today.
Yeah, so this is great question. I think if to add on top of what Carly and Nikita just said, I think what is also important when you're trying to solve an engineering problem is also estimate resources that are available to you and user user feedback. So for me, as a startup founder, the only feedback that matters to me is user feedback. That's why before building any product, what we do a lot of customer or user interviews to understand what they actually want. Because sometimes in past, for example, I built a very complex machine learning model. It was real-time inference, but I would say the problem was so complex, and it took time to process the data and input and receive an output from our machine learning model that it could take, I would say, more than a minute for a user to see the output of our model. And then when I returned back to users and asked, do they really need real-time inference because it was so expensive to run? It happened that no, it's okay if they will see updates every week. So that's why it's of course very important to understand what are actually your users' needs, and then based on their feedback, design your product and solution, and define technology that you're going to use, and also with respect to resources that are available to you. So that's also important to evaluate in advance. Do you have sufficient resources to do it? For example, real-time inference for prediction. And so this is from a business side. If we will look at this question from a learning perspective for engineers, because I did not have a computer science degree initially, so I moved into this field 6 years ago. Before I was a lawyer, it was quite a learning path for me. But I think what is important here, I think the main problem right now is that there are so many resources and so much information available, and sometimes you're just overwhelmed with amount of information you have. So just choose your channel, the best learning channel for you that you really like and understand, and then focus on that and complete it from beginning until the end and master that. So if you want to learn, for example, as a machine learning scientist, I learn also do a lot of research studies. I learn a lot about machine learning models, and there are two approaches how you can become machine learning scientist. You can just try different models, right? See how they work, do several tutorials. But what I found for me is really valuable as researcher is to look into architecture, for example, transformer architecture that is behind GPT model, and understand exactly how it works, why there is every single element there, why there is this encoder and decoder and self-attention and positional encoding, trying to understand every single element of the model. And when you understand every single element of the model, you're able to innovate, you're able to create something better and something unique, but also that can solve the problems of users that have not been solved yet.
True. I think that's true. You should never get startled by any problem statement. I always said that, I was reacting for any problem statement. I don't know much, I don't know things. But eventually when I started facing it, I started responding to it. I stopped reacting to it. That means, like, my journey of being somebody as an engineer was always about, like, what, let's approach a problem statement first and let's see, okay, where we can go ahead with it. Then we can just try out and work around with it. So there's a lot that I have to learn. There's a lot that community needs to understand before they approach anything as engineers today. I think, Zufar, you can go on with your approach of how to be an engineer, and also you can also talk about how to approach any problem statement. So that would be the question to you.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting, to this streamline, and thank you for your stories about your experience, and all of these answers were really interesting. Well, um, so let me understand. So um, my goal to explain my experience regarding DevOps. Sorry, I have read uh, pre- the text of this post about this event, and I understood that we are sharing our experience and knowledge regarding DevOps culture, right?
Yes.
Okay, regarding DevOps, so honestly, I'm a newcomer in this field, and anyway, I think it would be great to share my, like, fresh emotions, conclusions uh, regarding this field. So recently I wrote an article where I describe step-by-step tutorial how to build modern CI/CD pipeline. But then after publishing it, I uh, realized, understood that it was not so good, this pipeline not so good, and that I did a lot of actions manually with UI, with some command execution, which I typed manually and then executed manually, and then experienced DevOps engineers helped me to understand that modern way is to create pipelines using infrastructure as a code approach. And I also would like to share with you that it's not bad thing to start learning new field like DevOps, even if you have no experience, no understanding. You can just start. You can set some maybe a really big goal reach it, achieve, like get some achievement, and then get like enable people to criticize you, get this feedback, and then this way, like you experience some feedback, and together it's new insight for you. And it's like it was my journey, and I can advise that this journey is safe and useful for getting new insights. So I hope I, I I shared it clearly.
Yeah. It's always that, you have to be, more affine to take feedbacks as quick as possible. Because moment you make it a little longer, I'm a little young in the industry, if people are scolding me, it's because they literally feel that, you can be a good engineer, but you're not the right engineer for this point of time. I think probably that approach is something that is needed rather than just going out there saying that, I'm too young. Why are they just putting me onto the feedback loop, and why am I still going through all this? So I think it makes a lot of sense. As a fresher, I'm still learning a lot. I'm still learning a lot. I'm still going out to places. I'm still asking people like how to actually approach any problem statement. My first question was how to approach a problem statement to all of you. So yeah, of course I got it. So the next thing is, there is a lot of thing that goes behind using intellectual property or being in an open source world, open sourcing a project, as well as, there is a new jargon in the market, build versus the buy decision that we have to make. So there's a lot that has to go behind. So let's understand what's the buy versus the build decision, or else use the open source and build decisions that we have to make, as well as how to actually build a sustainable community out of it. Because there are places where we can see that, this is the project, they make a clone of it, and now they publish it out there as their own project, but it doesn't work like that. There's a lot of engineering that goes behind that open source software as well. So let's talk about an open source ecosystem and its impact in the DevOps world, in any aspects, build or buy or else own an open source project as a contributor and build it. So I think, Carly, you can start your answers through your experience of experiencing the open source community, about the vibrance that it has, as well as the commitment that they have, as well as some experience on how any organization is approaching today. So because you're seen adapted towards different technologies, I think you can share a lot here. Then we can go to Tatiana and of course Nikita and Zufar. So let's start with it.
Sure. So I actually have two very different experiences of open source. So the first 10 years of my career, I worked in a large investment bank. And one of the things I found really interesting that I think is still the case for a lot of large institutions, and this is not a surprise, is really they seem to be leveraging a lot of open source technologies in the software that they're building, but it's not always easy in order to give contributions and maintenance back. Now, there's several reasons for that. It might be down to structures where you need to have a form of kind of approval or a declared outside business interest for that, depending on if it's a regulated or non-regulated sector, which I think gives sometimes the wrong impression that you can take contributions from someone and not necessarily, give something back to the community. So it needs to be a two-way street, I think. Meanwhile, obviously, my experience with Elastic is that it's something that is considered to be a really strong part of our roots. It's something that came in from the beginning. It's something that Shai, our CTO, still talks about. The thing is with open source is that because it's freely available, it's something that has multiple eyes on it. So you end up finding that changes come through more quickly, rather than if you're taking something and then expecting, like you would have with purchase software, where you can put in a feature request and perhaps expect it to be turned around for you a bit more quickly. It really, and then even I would question if it's actually going to come through quicker or not, because there's all sorts of extenuating factors that would influence that kind of turnaround time. So my honest thought with regards to open source is it's a fantastic thing, but we need to nurture it and make sure that it's not something that is going to be taken advantage of. And that we actually need to make sure that we're contributing back as well as taking advantage of the features of this software. Does that always kind of work out? No. I mean, we've had several instances of license changes, thinking about MongoDB. You've got, obviously, elephant in the room, the Elastic license change in 2021. And then even there's Terraform recently with HashiCorp. And I think what's important is whenever you're dealing with license changes, you have to communicate it honestly. You need to explain what is still free and accessible within the bounds of the paid software. So obviously in the case of using Elastic as an example, there's still the free basic. Can't really call it open source anymore because it's under that dual license. But if you're wanting to use it for the same cases for building software and solving problems and searching for things, that is something you can still do. But that message needs to be communicated in a way that's easy to understand. I talk to a lot of developers, and one of the things that sometimes confuses them is they think they can't use it for their use case anymore. And that just means it's worth having a conversation, actually clarifying what the terms of the license are, because I am not a legal expert. Most developers who are using or contributing to open source software are not legal experts either. So we need to try and be able to communicate these things in simple terms so that people feel comfortable contributing in a nice, comfortable ecosystem, because that's a great way to connect and find other individuals and learn, which was one of the points that Zufar was mentioning. But we also need to make sure that we're all comfortable within that ecosystem. But I'm sure Tatiana and Nikita will have further insights as well.
Sure. I think Tatiana is more of an advocate for open source or anything which is related to taking care of an IP of an project or something. So I think Minty Code is also trying its efforts in making sure it's more advantageous to a creator rather than just making it more advantageous for the people who are adapting the technology. And there's a lot that has to be covered in terms of the loss of open source. There's a lot that we have to cover. So I think, Tatiana, your insights are much valuable. I think you can answer a lot about this question.
Yeah, so definitely that's a huge problem, open source. It's very interesting puzzle that we're trying to solve at Minty Code, because we want, I do believe that creators, they do deserve fair attribution and fair reward. And without rewarding creators, initial creators, and even contributors, people who help you to improve your project, there is no way how we can create sustainable and scalable open source projects. But the challenge here is how do we incentivize contribution to existing projects, not cloning and copying and stealing someone else's projects, and then how we can help all contributors, all creators to get a sustainable source of income from this project, from their work. So that's why it's important to understand when you make your project open source, what do you want to achieve with that? And there are multiple ways how you can monetize it. You can still keep it open source, but then monetize it through additional support services, and that will be beneficial for community who would like to get access to priority support immediately instead of just waiting for weeks and months when their problem will be solved. Or you can introduce restrictive licenses, and I don't think it's a problem. I think it's just a way for to respect creators, right? And what is important here, why licensing is important, because licensing is not only about I would say restriction. It does not impose any significant restrictions, but it's more about responsibility and liability. So right now you have a company which is responsible for software that it has developed, and that's fantastic. That's what we want. We want to use in our tech stack those open source projects that are well maintained, right? That we can go return to creator or the company that is supporting this project and say, look, it does not work. You have to fix it. So that's why licensing is really important. So I see it as an advantage having a specific type of licensing, commercial licenses for widely used databases or different libraries that you use in production. And if you think about open source and the way how we develop our applications, I'm really amazed by the way how like it all depends on different smaller projects and smaller libraries, and you cannot even sometimes imagine that it's actually dependent on, I don't know, on very small component, and if the small component will not be maintained, then hundreds of thousands of applications will be just will be under huge risk. So that's why it's important to create sustainable communities, but also sustainable business models. And from my personal experience as a data scientist, I worked I remember, when I worked as a data science consultant, I was asked to create a project where I would use, let's say, Elasticsearch, right, or something like that, and integrate it with large language models like ChatGPT, and but I was asked to use alternatives of Elastic because Elastic was not open, and I tried to find alternatives on GitHub, I tried to use them, but there was no enough documentation. And when I returned back to Elastic, they had a very clear tutorial how to do it. There was support available, and then I returned back to my team and said, "Look, let's use something that is better supported than some, I don't know, other libraries that are abandoned or other projects that are abandoned. Yes, they are free, but then it will take us several months to find a way how to integrate it, and because it's not supported, we cannot even guarantee that it's actually will be functional. We will need to maintain it on our own, and that creates a lot of problems. So that's why I don't think that I think that having rewarding creators and protecting your IP is something that is beneficial, because as a creator, you care about what you create if you're responsible for that. If you have legal obligations and responsibilities imposed on you by either commercial license that you're selling to your clients, or either services like priority support services that you provide to your clients or users. And that's why it's beneficial for a wider community. And another aspect I also want to raise is about rewarding a broader community. I think right now we're just at the stage where we're trying to find a way, how do we incentivize contributors, right? What can we give them back? People who help you to improve your open source projects. And I envision the world where instead of creating many copies and clones of different open source projects and working on their own, every software engineer would be incentivized to contribute to existing projects, because that will be beneficial for them, because they will see that first of all, it will help community to get access to maintained and improved versions of this open source project, but also they will be rewarded for that, whether through recognition and attribution of their work or through financial rewards. And that's what we're doing at Minty Code. We're exploring the ways how you can incentivize your community members and build sustainable sources of income from open source projects, whether you are a maintainer or creator of open source project.
Got it. I think that's great. A lot of insights, lot of responsibly delivering a value through an open source ecosystem. I think that's a cool way to do software today, right? I think that's great. Thank you so much, Tiana. I think Nikita, I think you have been seeing the open source for a long time, and you have been adapting open source for a long time. So I think what according to you makes a huge impact when it comes to architecting using open source as well as contributing back to the open source. So what is that one delta that you're looking forward to in that world understands and they come back? Because mastering DevOps is not just rigging pipelines and doing stuff which is TensorFlow or anything. Terraform, not TensorFlow. That comes in MLOps, but Terraform or something like that, it's beyond it. So what do you feel about open source ecosystem that is helping us engineer as well as the way we have to look back for the contributions in the world today?
Well, it depends. Uh, open source is actually a license, so that's how we define it. Like technically, it's a license, which how do you say it? Which specifies the relationship between group of people, which is extremely important. So, in terms of choosing open source, that's a tricky question again. So, I think I partially answered it before. So, you need to start with why and conditions around you. So, what exactly are you trying to achieve? Is there support? Is community life, and so on? Regarding contributing to open source, especially as a business, because I want to be like it's not a devil's advocate, it's a good people's advocate here, because I think especially maybe juniors, I don't know, at least for myself, it was a surprise to realize that most open source, the critical ones, are actually backed by business. And the percentage was like huge. We're speaking like 80-90%, and probably even including Linux. Because open source is cool, we have a license that everybody can contribute and so on, but GitHub needs money to run servers. You need money to organize events. You need money to bring in lawyers when somebody's stealing your stuff. So I think I would rather bring examples of quality tools and quality success. And to be honest, I will play an advocate here as well, and I will start with HashiCorp. I haven't really looked into their case, but as I understand, they created absolutely critical tools for the community. And good-willed as they were, young and naive maybe, they've chosen a license which allows everybody to use their stuff, which is good, but it included their competitors. I don't know, Kali will be the best person to tell, but for example, as I understand, Grafana is using open source of Elasticsearch. And so instead of stealing Elastic, they actually build something on the top of it, and they make Elastic more popular. So I prefer this kind of collaboration, both in real life and in open source, that my goal is not to exploit somebody's open source because there's a huge amount of work behind it and because it's not healthy, because this way somebody who actually created it, they will stop contributing, will poison the community. Maybe I'm naive. Another good example is Atomic Jar. So Atomic Jar, they create, basically they allow you to write tests using annotations which actually inject containers like Docker containers. So you can create tests which will be using Postgres database, which will just appear like that, which will appear out of nowhere as long as you have Docker. So, but the story about them, that originally it was, and still it is, it started with test containers, which is open source. And because community fell in love with it. I mean, you will see Trisha Gee showing it. You will see like Venkat Subramaniam showing it. The stuff is amazing. It saves you so much time. You don't need to install this thing manually and to create, all these weird ways of talking to containers for your tests. So when the community saw that it's so cool and people need it, and they saw that some companies are coming to them and asking for priority support. So they created Atomic Jar, which I think they got like $20 million investment. They didn't kill their test containers, but they created Atomic Jar. And I think both in terms of searching for tools and both in terms of contributing to them, if we are talking about business, you must start with lawyers. You must start with licenses. You need to understand how you don't damage the stuff. Because yesterday, DevRelCon, there was a great talk where they mentioned that often software developers and other software people in IT, we often damage our careers and reputation by actually contributing to open source, because we do it in a way which, in the best case, not always, but sometimes it happens that it just costs business money. So you'll find many companies who don't benefit from open source, and so if they already don't benefit and they sponsor something, and now you choose a license which damages them, then we have a problem. So I'm all about care and choosing the right thing. But answering your question, I think open source is a great another tool which you can choose when it's the best tool for the job. So that's my answer.
Got it. Sure. I think let's end the podcast with this question, because I think there are four panelists today. I think it's the biggest that I had ever since I started my podcast journey. So I think let's start with this journey, because as even Zufar is also very new to the industry. I'm very new to the industry. So I think Zuber can answer these questions as well, because he's more into the Java. He has seen the oldest version of the Java, and today it's also come up with the newest version of the Java. So let's just talk about like how to future proof our architecture today, because fundamentally, I can't upgrade my Kubernetes cluster every 3 months, because there is $1 million worth of investment that has gone through already, and now it's also minting that money back to me. So now it's not a right choice to upgrade every 6 months, or else even an year once. It doesn't make any sense if you have more than 5,000 microservices or even 500 microservices. There's a lot that goes behind. So let's talk about what are the essential steps and strategies that is required for an organization today to future proof their systems infrastructure in facing the rapidly evolving technology and a market disruption, as well as being ready for something that is new. I think today's technology is more adaptable to the new things, but back then it was not the same thing, right? People still run legacy system because they can't adapt quicker. So let's talk about like how to future proof the system, as well as how to strategize future proofing, so that we can adapt to something new quicker and faster than before.
Okay, so I can mention probably a few things when it comes to future proofing, because I have experience working with brand new technologies. I also have experience of maintaining existing legacy applications and services, and I've worked in mixed ecosystems as well. And it gets really hard. So the first thing for future proofing I'm going to recommend, having maintained legacy systems where you have no idea what's going on and you're trying to figure out how it works in an outage situation, is you need to document what's going on. And I know I know developers are not necessarily the biggest fans of documentation, but there are tools you can use to help you a little bit. So using things like C4 to try, because obviously infrastructure as code is a great way to start in terms of documenting what services you've got, what your Kubernetes setup is looking like. But if they're talking to other things, sometimes it's useful to have corresponding diagramming. So using tools such as C4, where you can actually store your structure along with other kind of interesting documentation, means that for someone 5, 10, 20 years down the line, sadly, in some cases it is definitely that long, where they're having to maintain what your application is trying to do, because due to investment or any other decisions, it's still alive and they've not been able to change it or upgrade it or rewrite it to something else. They need to understand what your decisions were. So seeing what the architecture was intended like, and also having it stored in source code so you can see the changes, is a useful thing. And it also encourages them to keep changing that documentation as well. The other thing is making use of ADRs, an architecture decision record, to show why you made that decision. When you maintain legacy systems, sometimes you'll look at what's been done and you'll go and look and say, why did they do that? We would never do that now. That's absolutely crazy. Why have they done it this way? It's really easy to pass judgment, but the reality is they've probably made that decision, just like we were talking about at the start with the first question, based on the information they had at the time. So try and not pass judgment. Instead, just try and find out why they've made those decisions. And ADRs are a great way to document that for the future. You also need to make sure your stuff is adhering to the DevOps principles of logs, metrics, and traces. It needs to be observable. You need to be able to see what's going on in it. Now, legacy systems most likely will not have up-to-date monitoring capabilities. You'll most likely be relying on logs. So get your logs into a centralized place. Try and make use of automatic agents that can actually pull in basic tracing information, because there might be situations with a legacy app where you might not be able to change the code for whatever reason. So if you can do automatic instrumentation with an APM agent, or using things like open telemetry and open standards, so that you can see what's happening inside your services, that they're logging out the right information, but also you've got metric and trace information. You can then see what's going on. You can look for things like memory utilization. You can start to look for degradations in the performance of the app so that you can then see what's going on. And I think also, sadly, we do need to actually update dependencies and try and keep as close to the edge of the at least long-term supported versions of things. Because I've been in situations where you've ended up maybe skipping a few versions, particularly when I worked on Angular in the past, and you had, oh, we'll just leave the Angular 1 app sitting in the ecosystem. But then obviously when long-term support was pulled for Angular 1, you've got a panic where you have to try and rewrite these massive apps that have been sitting for a long time. So as much as it is painful and as much as it's very natural to prioritize the feature requests of a user over maintenance and over keeping up to date with dependencies, it's actually better that you do. You've got to try and keep as close to it as you can. There's also certain jurisdictions where actually you have to, it's actually a compliance factor that you need to make sure you're on the latest version. So also make sure if that's something that impacts the ecosystem in which you work as well. And try and, as I said, reinforce this more, try and use the open standards as well, because those most likely they might have thought through some of the issues, but it also means that if you're complying to an open standard, such as when we talk about monitoring and open telemetry, that means that most likely you can switch providers so that, you know, if one particular tool isn't doing the job for you anymore, or you're needing to consolidate, if you're using something that's compliant with an open standard, you can then switch whenever you need to. There's probably tons more that others will mention, but I'll kind of highlight those key ones first.
Got it. Then I think Tatiana, I think you have a very diverse experience. I think you can share a lot of insights on how to future-proof a system, because when you started your journey, probably you should have encountered so many things which are like, I feel this can be outdated, but you know what? It's unpredictably most requiredly run for a very long time. I think you can share your journey of how to future-proof a system, as well as how to be ready for something new to be adaptable over a course of time.
Yeah, so this is really great question. Yeah, because I'm working also in machine learning field that is evolving so quickly, right? So these frameworks, libraries, technologies that we used 6 years ago, they are outdated. And every year there are so many new frameworks, new models, new libraries, new DevOps tools, and different infrastructure changes that help you to scale your applications. And in machine learning, that's very critical. I think, it was quite a challenge, especially with different, frameworks, for example, and because every company that develop this framework, they're trying to, I would say, they are all open source, but they try to, I would say, advertise them, and you are, as a beginner, you're always confused. What should you use? What is the right technology to use? I remember this, always, for example, the way how I write machine learning models, right? Which framework do I use? Do I use TensorFlow or PyTorch, recently, like last year, Google introduced JAX, and I was okay. So I learned TensorFlow, but then it became outdated in like couple years. People use more PyTorch, and then there is this new last year they introduced this JAX, and I was like, do I need to learn it again or not? And that's a huge problem when things are moving so quickly. And for me, the main answer to this problem is understand what is behind that. You just need to understand, how does it work without if you understand conceptually the difference between this updates and upgrades, but you also deeply understand what is I would say model behind that, or what is logic behind this framework, right? Because it's just different ways to solve the same problem, and they may have different set of features that are solving this problem, but the problem is the same. The basic problem is the same that these frameworks are trying to solve. And I would say, from a research perspective, for me as well, what is important, it's important that I understand every single implementation. I don't just copy from a tutorial. I need to understand exactly why it's there and what does it mean. And when I understand exactly how it's implemented, what problem it solves, every single line of the code, if I understand that, if I understand the logic of every single line of the code, then I'm able to I'm able to switch frameworks very quickly, and even think about creating my own framework, right? And become an open source contributor or writing research paper about that. So that's why understanding fundamental problem behind technology that is trying to solve, that's important. And then understanding the differences, how is it how this framework is trying to solve this problem is also important. And if you understand it at every very deep level, then you will not have challenges in I would say switching between frameworks that are better versions, or following upgrades.
Sure, I think that's a great way to put up this answer, because you know you have to follow some steps. You have to think futuristic. I think that's the key goal about anything that you build for technology today, right? If you don't think futuristic, and if you don't adapt to tools which are like, okay, I can adapt towards anything over a future, but you know what, let me just bet on this technology, let me just put it on my system, rather than saying, why to waste some more days on POC? I think that's not going to make an impact in your production. So it's always about getting that right approach, getting the right engineering aspect. I think Nikita, I think you can start with some question by answering how to future proof a system, because I think you should have worked on some of the legacy systems in your past. So now when you think about the futuristic system that is coming out today, which is like microservices, serverless based architecture, what do you feel about them? And what do you think about how we can future proof it in the future? Like, think futuristic and future proof it, or else how to start the journey from the day one of thinking we can adapt something new in the future. So over to you.
So my answer will be actually you'll see it how it works. I believe that the most important is to stay in touch with community and keep your hand on the pulse. Why? Because like I might not be even thinking about, as Kali mentioned now, she went really into dependencies. So for them, it's very important. For me, it also will be very important, but maybe I will forget about it or something. But if I'm in touch with Kali, if I'm reading her posts and everything, then I will remember about it. So Tatiana mentioned that it's extremely important and useful to understand how the whole system works. There are corner cases because, well, you need to understand how it works if you want to keep an eye after your architecture. Maybe you won't understand every single byte in assembly language when the code is compiled, but still. So my answer will be, I'll be, for example, especially about architecture for DevOps and for others as well. For example, if I wanted to build a pipeline today, I will start with Zufar's article and I will quickly go through it, like which I know he's very shy. I think it's typical for us all. But for me, it's like a set of Lego bricks or some other construction toys bricks, because maybe his solution is not ideal, but I know this is better than mine, and I know that it will definitely enlist the key points and key communities to look up to. If, for example, I want to build something with Elastic and I want to make future-proof my application, I need to know what is the view of Elastic on the long-term architectures. And if I don't agree with something, I will come to them and ask and raise a question, and I will raise it in a way that is beneficial for Elastic. I will raise it openly with all respect, so they can get something for answering me. For example, another case, if I wanted to build an application which is, because long-term successful architecture, it can be understood from so many different points. If I want to create a long-term successful architecture which is conscious of nature, I will probably start with Green Software Foundation, which is supported by Linux Foundation, because I know that they do have architectures and patterns already created for me. So if I decide to go greener, and if I decide, for example, one of the ways to go greener is to uh, relocate your code when the season changes. So when it's winter in Norway, you move your code there to their cloud platform, to their server farms, because it's cheaper to cool. When it's winter in some other part, we can relocate there. But to do it easily, I will need to know what's the point of view of Green Software Foundation. And so, yeah, I think being part of community and not solving problems alone, that's extremely critical, because as I've seen in one article, I think it's called pencil paradox. Like from 200 years before, there's no single person in the world who can make a pencil, because nobody will know how to create wood, and in like how to create stuff which cuts wood, and how to create this thing inside, and how to create paint, and how to grow coffee to feed people who mine for the stuff, and so on. Nobody can create this ecosystem, but because it involves like hundreds of thousands of innovations by now. Like, even if I can create a pencil, can I actually program this thing, and how which cuts the pencils, and how long will it take? So I think don't ever go alone. Always find a community, be it a closed one in the company or outside. And here, open source is the key. And even if you're in a very closed company, you can talk to your friends inside and create a question which is abstracted from your business internals. So you can freely go to open source community and ask them questions without damaging your internal stuff. Does it answer your question?
True. I think that's the way to approach it, right? You don't know the foundation of anything. Like, I just have a pencil in front of me, right? It's not just a lead inside and wooden stack or something like that. It's a lot of technology that goes behind. There's a foundation of that design as well. So you need to understand everything from scratch. It's good to understand everything from scratch, which I'm lazy to understand something from scratch, because I feel that, what, if it can happen in 5 minutes, why not spend 4.5 minutes in doing it and 30 minutes in understanding it? But how about we spend 10 minutes, out of which 3 minutes you just make sure that you understand about it from the basics, and the 7 minutes is like you take your time and execute it. So I think something like that is important. I think Zufar is basically that one young dude today, who's now trying to enter the open source ecosystem, who is trying to contribute a lot to open source ecosystem through articles and other means. I think he can really give that insight about what he saw through his journey about building a futuristic system, or else he has coded something which is new as well. So I think he can share his insights on how to future proof a system and an architecture approach today. So yeah, over to you, Zufar.
So
Yes,
can I
I
just
think we have some.
intervene for a second, Zufar? Just 10 seconds. Besides following Zufar on Hackanoon and social, if we speak about DevOps, it will be a very, very, very good idea to follow CNCF, Cloud Native Software Foundation, and people who are deep there, and companies like Sivo, like Kunal Kushwaha, like Eddie Jaoud, because then you'll have friends who really know open source, and then you can come to Zufar and say that, Zufar, you get so many content going like really deep in this stuff. Let's investigate this one. Let's make an article about it. Let's make a post, because for these people in CNCF, they have already followed these steps. So their experience of beginning stuff or creating something might be not as fresh. So you will help a lot of other people who are continuing their journey and are not full experts yet. So that's all. So CNCF.
Got it, got it. Cloud Native Compute Foundation. So yeah, I think it's making a lot of impact. Sure, then, Sufar, over to you, my friend.
Yeah, sure. I would like to answer your question, but sorry for that. May I ask you to repeat it to make me fully understand your question, please?
So basically, my question was to building a future-proof system, because over a course of time, let's say there is always a chance that, as Carly told, there is always that one futuristic view that we need to have, document everything. Probably 20 years or 30 years down the line, somebody needs to know what is there behind the hood of a system. So in fact, today it's not the same, right? Kubernetes is changing. There's a lot of things happening in the CF ecosystem. Softwares are like so many today, right? So in order to make sure that we are future ready, that means we can adapt to any new tool, we can adapt to any new technology, or else we can even adapt to any new version of the same software that is coming out today. I think that was my question. So basically, future proofing is basically to make sure that you write a code today and it's not outdated for the next 10 years. Somebody can improvise on it. So that is the approach that we wanted to understand.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Well, um, so this question is regarding open source and DevOps. Am I right?
So basically, because I know Zufar, we have big friends. So basically, let's say you built an application, but how do you make sure that in 20 years time, in 5 years time, it still works well for the business? How do you choose architecture and protect it from, deleting everything and creating again?
Yeah, thank you for your help, Nikita. Well, yeah, it's a good question because me as a creator of my small open source project, I have already noticed how important to think about the future, about your future architecture, about the things that one day you need to scale your system. You will get more new clients, more new customers, and um, and I think yes, I have some conclusions and maybe life hacks which I can share regarding this question. So first of all, maybe it's a simple advice. Well, you just need to support and guarantee that your system, your code, your particular modules, they follow solid principles. And I really want to highlight this advice because this way, as you like try to guarantee that you will be able to easily understand what each module of your system is responsible for, how you can like get rid of it completely, how you can add new model easily without changing existing models, existing code. You can just do it with less efforts. Okay, it's a first thing, and maybe a second thing is do everything simple for you, for your team, for your client. Really try to put all your efforts to make everything simple as much as you can. And this way, you can also increase your chance for your further success for you, for your system, and for your client. And of course, ask questions and feedback of your colleagues, customers, maybe even competitors in your business. in just around you in your environment, okay? And this way you can um, you can see your product, your project, like not with like deeper and clearly this way, okay? So yeah, I think from my perspective, with my experience, it's everything what I can strongly advise. Maybe I have something else what I can share, but I will finish on this point. Okay.
Sure. I think this was a perfect example, right? When somebody has to start putting in an approach to move away from a legacy system, it's an investment on its own. But thinking futuristic and making sure somebody is ready for something as a new technology and they can adapt towards it, I think that's a cool way to say, I have understood my system deeply, and tomorrow if it goes down, I know how to get it up and running in another 30 minutes or so. I think that should be the confidence that we need. I think thank you so much, Sufar. That was an being a young dude in the industry, you gave that insight. I think that was amazing. That was amazing for you. And thanks to all my panelists today, so for Carly, Nikita, Tatiana, especially, it was a last minute call that Nikita started putting in a lot of people in, but it was a great podcast today. It was a great set of insight. I would love to do an one-on-one podcast with you folks. I wanted to understand more about you folks, but I was not able to understand much today. But probably in the future, I'm going to invite you all one-on-one, and we are going to discuss a lot about things. And I think in a short span of time, we have covered a lot, and a lot of things has been shared. And thank you so much to my panelists. It was amazing podcast.
Thanks for having us. See you
Thank
soon.
Thank you.
Sure, folks. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
So
amazing.
this is yes. I think Nikita has something to say now.
No, I just wanted to say that it's amazing, and I think we need to meet regularly to provide, because I
Sure.
think we approach same things from very different points of view, and when we all together we approach it, then no area goes uncovered. We have a search engine specialist. We have well, among other things, like damaging stuff with T's and coding and everything you can code. And we have a DevOps expert. We have a person who is an expert in law and the ML, and like, wow. And we have a really good hands-on developer who shares with the community so much. And we have me who who cannot stop speaking. So when we come together, we'll have great fun. And Vishwas, you have I really like your channel on YouTube. You have 1,800 plus people. That's a very good result for a YouTube channel. So I wish you to get 200,000 like Eddie does.
Sure. I think that's coming soon. That's coming soon. I'm putting my efforts to build that digital community out there where anything and everything about the DevOps can be talked about. I think I'm putting my efforts. Hopefully one day it just happens. And thank you so much to my panelists. This is Vishwas Nayan signing off from the show. See you soon, my friends. New panelist, a new guest, a new topic, a lot more energetic knowledge that is coming on your way. Stay tuned, my friends. See you soon. I'm ending the broadcast now.